Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you was never meant to be spoken aloud. In the winter of ** 1852 ** on the edge of the Mississippi, a night existed that Memphis officials quietly erased. An auction that appeared in no ledger, no newspaper, no court proceeding. But if you stand near the old riverbank on a December night, when the fog rolls low and the lamps flicker against the water, some say you can still hear the crowd fall silent. The moment ** he ** stepped into the lamplight. Not a rumor, not a ghost story, a man of flesh and bone, yet so impossible, so unnervingly beautiful, that half the men present forgot to breathe. But before we descend into the heart of this mystery, I need you to understand something much darker. ***, the most valuable things in history were never commodities. They were symbols, ***, objects, relics, and sometimes people used to manipulate the ambitions of powerful men. Memphis understood this better than any city in the South. Behind its polite society, its polished auctions, its riverfront wealth, the city pulsed with an unspoken hunger, the hunger for ownership, dominance, and control over anything that made a man feel * closer to the divine. *, and in 1852, when this young slave, known only as ** Lazarus *, was led onto a private auction platform, every powerful man present felt it instantly. A pull, a tug, a sensation like someone was reaching inside their thoughts and rearranging them. No one could explain it. Not the traders, not the buyers, not the physicians who later examined him. They only agreed on one thing. ***, he was unlike any human they had ever encountered. ***, he didn't look afraid. He didn't look broken. He didn't look trained. He looked aware of the crowd, aware of the men bidding, aware of the world that believed it owned him. And when he finally raised his head, slowly, deliberately, the atmosphere changed. Every man there would later describe the same sensation, as if this young stranger wasn't the one being inspected, but rather the one doing the inspecting. I'm telling you now, not as a storyteller, but as someone who has studied the hidden patterns. Rare individuals have always surfaced at critical moments in history, anomalies, aberrations, disruptions. Men governments feared, men institutions tried to bury, men who carried a kind of presence that could bend another man's confidence, or his destiny. Lazarus was one of them, and the elite of Memphis. They didn't buy him for labor. They bought him because they believed he was ***, a key ***, to influence, to prophecy, to something far older than the American South. Most men in Memphis believed they controlled their fate. They believed wealth insulated them, that lineage protected them, that owning other human beings somehow proved their superiority. But the night Lazarus appeared, that illusion fractured, and I need you to understand why. Because this is where the real descent begins. See, there are moments in history when an event is not just an event. It's a *** signal ***, a disturbance, a crack in the comfortable narrative powerful institutions build to keep ordinary minds asleep. Lazarus was that crack. The three men who attended that private auction weren't simple traders or plantation lords. They were something far more dangerous, *** men who thought they deserved to reshape the world. ** Judge Nathaniel Creighton, heir to a family of political brokers. Dr. Elias Vanmore, the city's quiet collector of forbidden sciences, and of course Senator Ashford Hale, the man whose influence stretched from the Mississippi River to Washington City. They didn't come to buy labor. They came because each had received a letter, unsigned, unsealed, delivered by unknown hands. Inside, only one sentence, ***, come witness the boy born of no master. ***, a taunt, a promise, or a threat. They couldn't decide. But the letters worked. Each man arrived with the same internal question they would never confess aloud. What could possibly make a human being worth summoning the region's most powerful men in secret? When Lazarus stepped onto the platform, shackled only by formality, not by necessity. They understood. Beauty alone wasn't the force they felt. No, this was something older, deeper, almost evolutionary. A presence that destabilized the hierarchy of the room. Judge Creighton's pulse accelerated. Dr. Vanmore's pupils contracted. Senator Hale whispered, "Impossible," without realizing anyone heard him. Because what stood in front of them didn't merely defy categories. It rearranged them. His skin was smooth, untouched by lash or labor. His posture, effortless, upright, resembled no slave they had ever known. His eyes, his eyes, they weren't submissive, they were evaluative, measuring, calculating, like a man accustomed to choosing, not being chosen. The auctioneer attempted to begin the bidding, but no one moved. For the first time in their lives, men who ruled Memphis simply waited for him to speak. And when Lazarus finally lifted his gaze, locking eyes with each of them in turn, the temperature seemed to drop. Not metaphorically, physically, as if the air recoiled around him, but what disturbed them most wasn't his beauty. It was the certainty, absolute, unshakable, that Lazarus knew why they were there. He knew what they wanted. And he knew something they didn't. Whoever purchased him wouldn't be the master. You need to understand something before we go any deeper. Powerful men don't fear violence. They don't fear rebellion. They don't even fear death. What they truly fear is loss of control, and on that night in 1852, every man in that room, men who'd shaped laws, fortunes, and futures, felt control slipping from their grip the moment Lazarus exhaled. Just a breath, just a shift of the chest. But the effect was immediate, almost chemical. Dr. Vanmore later wrote in his private medical notes sealed after his death, an observation he never dared publish. The boy triggered a response in the autonomic systems of each observer, as though his presence activated something dormant. Keep that phrase in your mind. Something dormant. We'll come back to it. The auctioneer finally forced himself to speak, his voice trembling like he'd swallowed ice water. Opening bid 1,000. A reasonable start. Customary. Predictable, but Lazarus shifted his head slowly, deliberately, toward Judge Creighton, and the judge felt chosen. He blurted out 2,000, too fast, too aggressive. The other men glanced at him, and in that moment the room's hierarchy reshuffled itself. 2,500. Senator Hale hissed, not taking his eyes off Lazarus. His voice was low, almost reverent. Then Vanmore stepped forward, ignoring the others entirely. 3,000. The auctioneer froze. This wasn't bidding. This was obsession, and Lazarus watched it unfold with a stillness so controlled it bordered on inhuman. But the truly disturbing part, he wasn't afraid, not anxious, not confused. He looked prepared, as if this moment had happened before, many times, and then it happened. Something no recorded slave auction had ever documented. Lazarus spoke first. His voice was calm, soft, precise. "I will go with the one who understands what I am. Not who I am, what I am." The words hit the room like a physical force. Judge Creighton staggered backward. Vanmore's jaw went slack. Hale's hands began to tremble. Because they all felt it. An implication so vast, so forbidden, that none dared say it aloud. This wasn't a slave choosing a master. This was something else choosing a vessel, an instrument. A participant in a design older than Memphis, older than America, older than the institution of slavery itself. And in that moment, every man in that room understood the truth behind the anonymous letters. They weren't summoned to buy him. They were summoned to be evaluated. The auctioneer tried to regain control, but the room had already shifted. No one bidding now believed they were participating in commerce, not in amour. This felt like initiation, like being drawn into a ritual none of them had prepared for. Judge Creighton stepped forward first, voice cracking under the weight of what he didn't understand. "What are you?" A question no enslaved man in the South had ever been asked. A question no man of that era was mentally equipped to pose. Lazarus blinked slowly, as though deciding how much, if anything, these men deserved to hear, but before he could answer, Dr. Vanmore interjected, his scientific training mutating into fixation. "He's an anomaly," Vanmore whispered. "A biological divergence. His symmetry, his poise, the autonomic response he triggers. This is deliberate, engineered. Engineered." He said it without hesitation, as though beauty, presence, and intelligence at that level couldn't possibly occur without a hidden hand sculpting them. Senator Hale's eyes narrowed. "No human is engineered. Speak sense, doctor." But Vanmore wasn't listening. He was staring at Lazarus's wrists, at the faint marks that weren't scars, but patterns, symmetrical, purposeful, almost sigil-like. The doctor's voice dropped to a whisper only the men closest to him heard. "These aren't wounds. They're markings, not tribal, not accidental. These are intentional designs carved with knowledge none of us possess." The judge swallowed hard. Old stories stirred in him, stories whispered in fraternal lodges, hidden rooms of libraries, and private conversations with men who traded in secrets. Not myths, warnings. He stepped closer to Lazarus. "Who put those marks on you?" Lazarus didn't move, didn't blink. Instead, he asked a question, one so calm, so exact, it drained the color from Hale's face. "Do you believe identity is inherited, or chosen?" Not a question for slaves. Not a question for buyers. A question for initiates. And this is where most viewers miss the point. This is where the real story begins. These men weren't fighting to own him. They were fighting to understand what possessing him meant, because somewhere deep inside, each sensed the same terrifying truth. Lazarus wasn't a man being sold. He was an invitation to knowledge that rewrites the nature of hierarchy. The hierarchy of nations, of families, of men. And as the bidding restarted, quiet now, reverent, they weren't bidding with money and amour. They were bidding with ego, fear, hunger, pieces of themselves placed silently on the table. The bidding didn't feel like bidding and amour. It felt like confession, like each man was exposing the part of himself he'd spent a lifetime hiding beneath reputation, bloodline, and polished manners. Judge Creighton raised the offer to 4,000 with a voice that shook, not from fear of cost, but from fear of losing whatever Lazarus represented. Senator Hale countered with 5,000, a sum that would have been political suicide had anyone discovered it. To him, though, it wasn't a purchase, it was acquisition of power, or protection from it. Dr. Vanmore didn't speak at all. He simply held up 6 fingers, $6,000, enough to buy land, men, influence, entire futures. And yet Lazarus didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't show the slightest recognition that his value had just surpassed anything recorded in Memphis history. Instead, he watched them the way a man watches flames devour a building he designed to burn. Then something happened, something so unsettling that even the auctioneer stumbled backward. Lazarus smiled, not a smile of gratitude, not fear, not submission, a knowing smile, a smile that said, "You're finally showing who you truly are." Creighton felt his stomach drop. Because he realized the truth first, Lazarus was unmasking them, pulling their private ambitions into the open, exposing them through desire, and none of them could stop. The judge stepped closer, voice cracking. "Why us? Why summon us?" Lazarus tilted his head slightly, an angle too precise to be casual. "You summoned yourselves. I simply allowed you to gather." Allowed. The word hit harder than any insult. Dr. Vanmore's breathing quickened. "Are you saying we were drawn here, manipulated?" Lazarus's eyes moved to him, quiet, analytical, ancient. "You followed the part of yourselves you pretend not to have." He wasn't talking about greed, or lust, or status. No, he was speaking to something older, something each of those men felt but never admitted, the hunger for secret knowledge, for a form of power no nation could grant and no institution could teach. And this is where you, the viewer, need to listen closely, Because men today, modern men, aren't any different. They chase money, status, control, thinking those things will make them unbreakable. But real power starts when you stop lying to yourself about what you truly want. If you feel that inside you, if you feel this dissent waking something deeper, comment this twice to lock it in. I see through the veil. I see through the veil. Because the deeper we go, the more that phrase will become your anchor. They say every empire has a room it refuses to talk about, a cellar, a vault, a chamber built not for glory, but for silence. And in the final decades of the 19th century, the people of Harrogate whispered about exactly that, an underground hall, carved beneath the old orphanage, where children were taken when their gift became too strong to control. No one above ground ever admitted it existed, but the floorboards told a different story. They trembled at night. They pulsed with a faint, rhythmic tapping, like fingernails against stone, or like someone trying to speak without a tongue. It was in that forgotten chamber that Thomas Kincaid awoke. Cold iron hugged his wrists, a leather strap cut across his chest. Around him, lanterns flickered against walls etched with chalk symbols, circles within circles, numbers that repeated endlessly, and a phrase written in 3 languages. We separate the sight from the mind. Thomas knew why he was there. His mother had warned him all his life, never look at the shadows directly, they will look back. But after the night he saw the figure in the attic, all thin joints bent the wrong way, his gift stopped being a secret. And now, these men in dark coats wanted to open his head like a book. A door groaned open. Boots entered. The tapping on the walls stopped. The doctor who stepped forward didn't look human. His eyes were too calm, too empty. "Thomas," he said softly, "we're going to help you forget." But Thomas didn't want to forget. He wanted answers. "What was that thing in the attic?" he asked. "Why did it know my name?" The doctor's smile barely moved. "Because, Thomas, it's been waiting for you." He pulled a lever. A panel slid open. Behind the wall of symbols was a glass enclosure, and inside it, suspended by wires, floated a creature shaped like a child, but wrong in every way. Its skin pale as moon frost, its eye sockets hollow and moving with a life of their own. It twitched when it sensed Thomas. The doctor leaned close and whispered, "Your gift is not a blessing. It's a magnet." Thomas screamed, not from fear, but because the creature pressed its featureless face against the glass, and whispered his own voice back at him. And in that moment he understood. It wasn't trapped, he was. For a long moment the chamber fell silent, so silent Thomas could hear his own heartbeat ricocheting off the stone. But beneath that pulse, something else stirred, a faint humming, like a lullaby sung by someone who had forgotten the words centuries ago. The creature inside the glass tilted its head, mimicking Thomas's breathing, matching it perfectly. Every inhale, every tremble, every fear. The doctor took notes calmly, as though this nightmare were nothing more than a math problem. "Fascinating resonance," he murmured. "He's synchronizing already." Thomas strained against the restraints. "What is it? Why does it sound like me?" The doctor didn't look up from his notebook. "It's not sounding like you, Thomas. You're sounding like it." The humming grew louder. Then the lights dimmed, not flickered, not hesitated, but dimmed, as if something colossal had inhaled the electricity in the room. The chalk symbols on the walls began to glow faintly, throbbing like veins under skin. The door behind them slammed shut on its own. One of the assistants froze in place, eyes wide. "Sir, we didn't activate the containment cycle." The doctor's expression finally cracked, just a hair. "Impossible." But the creature blinked, its hollow eyes focusing on Thomas with unnatural precision, and when it opened its mouth, no sound came out. Yet Thomas felt a vibration deep inside his bones. A pressure, a command. Memories flooded him, flashes of places he'd never seen, faces he'd never met, a tower made of spiraling stone stretching into black clouds, a voice whispering from the height of the world, "Find the door they buried." He gasped, nearly choking. "Stop, stop," but the creature pressed its face harder against the glass, and the humming shifted into a pattern, like coded speech wrapped in melody. The assistants stumbled back. One fell to his knees, clutching his ears. The doctor staggered forward and slammed his palm against a switch. Seal the conduit, now. A steel shutter began to descend over the glass chamber. Too slow, the creature raised one limb, thin, sharp, more like bone than flesh, and touched the inside of the glass. A single crack formed, fine, hairline, but alive, crawling across the surface like frost. Thomas watched it spread, and something inside him snapped. He didn't feel fear. He felt recognition, as if he were looking not at a monster, but at a mirror of the part of himself he was never meant to meet. The doctor screamed, "Get him out of here!" But the crack reached the edge of the window, and the glass shattered outward. The explosion of glass wasn't violent. It was silent. Too silent, the shards didn't scatter. They drifted, suspended in the air like droplets of frozen rain. Time slowed, and then something far stranger happened. Each shard reflected a different image. Not the room, not the people inside. Each fragment showed a different version of Thomas. One older, one younger, one scarred, one smiling, one dead. He stared, unable to breathe, feeling all of them tug at his mind like threads pulling him apart. The assistants collapsed instantly, blood leaking from their noses. The doctor stumbled backward, whispering, "No, no, the ley line isn't open enough for this. It shouldn't be able to anchor." The creature stepped forward. It didn't walk. It didn't float. It simply appeared closer, as if the space between it and Thomas had been erased. Its limbs folded inward, reshaping themselves with a soft, wet crack until its silhouette resembled something almost human, grotesquely familiar, like a sketch of a man drawn by someone who had never seen one. Thomas's restraints snapped open on their own. He didn't try to run. A numb calm washed over him, heavy and warm, like hands on his shoulders guiding him toward a fate already written. The creature leaned toward him, its face inches from his. In its hollow eyes, he saw not darkness, but a door, not a metaphorical one, a real one, wooden, ancient, bound with iron and ritual burns. A door buried beneath centuries of earth and lies. A door that somehow knew his name. The creature's voice entered him again, not as a sound, but as a thought stitched into his skull. "You were born from the fracture. You belong to the buried." Thomas's knees buckled. He felt himself falling, but the creature caught him with careful, almost tender hands. The doctor lunged forward, stabbing a syringe into his own arm, his skin lighting up with symbols that flashed and crawled like insects. "Thomas, listen to me," he shouted, body shaking violently as the symbols burned him from within. "Do not answer it. This thing doesn't want communion. It wants a vessel." The creature's head tilted. The humming returned, low and dangerous. Shards of glass finally rained to the floor, ringing like silver bells. Thomas tried to speak, but his voice failed. Not because he was afraid, because the voice inside him spoke first. "Open the buried door." The doctor screamed his name, and the room collapsed into darkness. The darkness wasn't empty. It moved, thick, heavy, slow as oil. Thomas felt himself sinking through it, though he wasn't sure he still had a body to sink with. There was no floor, no ceiling, no sense of direction, only pressure, folding him inward and stretching him outward at the same time. Then lights began to flicker into existence. Not lamps, not fire, eyes, dozens, hundreds, watching him from across an infinite black horizon. Some were human, most were not. Yet all of them held the same expression, recognition. As if they'd been waiting for him specifically to arrive. A voice echoed through the void, not the creature's, something older, deeper, too large to belong to anything with a shape. "You carry the fracture. You carry what they buried." Thomas tried to speak, but the darkness swallowed his words whole. Slowly, a dim outline began forming beneath him. Ground. Ancient stone carved with spirals and runes identical to the ones on the doctor's walls, but thicker, deeper, as if carved by something with claws instead of hands. A door stood in the center, the same one he had seen in the creature's eyes, tall, heavy, iron, bound, breathing, yes, breathing, expanding and contracting as though lungs lay behind it. Thomas stepped toward it without meaning to. His feet moved like they belonged to someone else, In the corner of his eye, he saw the creature appear, its body reassembled into an almost perfect copy of him, but taller, sharper, wrong in every precise and beautiful way. It stood at his side like a shadow that had finally crawled free. "Open it," it whispered, in a voice that was now unmistakably his own. Thomas reached out. His fingertips grazed the wood. A shock tore up his arm, into his chest, into his skull. Memories he never lived, lifetimes he never owned, rituals he never learned flooding him in an instant. He saw civilizations erased, cities swallowed, entire bloodlines trained for one purpose, to bring him to this door. He ripped his hand back, gasping, trembling. The eyes in the darkness blinked as one. The voice boomed again, shaking the stone beneath him. "You cannot run from the inheritance carved into your name." Thomas looked down at his hands. Lines glowed beneath the skin, symbols, patterns, the same spirals carved into the stone, rising like heat from his veins. The creature smiled, not a human smile, a completion. "The door recognizes you," it said softly, "because you were never meant to stay in their world." Thomas stumbled back, heart clawing at his ribs. Because now he understood the truth. The door wasn't meant to be opened. It was meant to be returned to, by him, and the darkness around him curled inward as if welcoming its lost son home. Thomas stood frozen, chest heaving, as the darkness curled closer, whispering in languages he had not learned but somehow remembered. The door loomed before him, pulsing like a heartbeat, iron bands contracting and expanding as though alive. He could feel it in his bones. Opening it would change everything. His life, his mind, the very order of the world. The creature, his mirror, his shadow, his guide, stepped forward. Its fingers grazed the door. The metal shivered. The spirals on its surface began to glow, feeding off the symbols now burning beneath Thomas's skin. The air vibrated with energy older than Memphis, older than civilization itself. "You think you choose," the creature said, voice layered, echoing in Thomas's chest. "But choice is an illusion. You were selected long before the first breath you can remember." Thomas stumbled closer, compelled, and for the first time truly understood the scope of what had been hidden from humanity for centuries. This was no simple inheritance, no mere secret passed down through clandestine societies. The knowledge behind this door was a blueprint, a master key designed to awaken certain minds, disrupt others, and realign power itself. The eyes in the darkness blinked as one, not human, not animal. Something older, something that had seen every empire rise and fall, every king and tyrant kneel before inevitability. They waited, watching, judging, expecting. Thomas placed his hand on the door. The iron burned hot, yet he did not recoil. A voice, his own and no one else's, resonated from inside. "You are the fracture, you are the bridge, you are the one who can walk both worlds." The darkness pressed closer, and Thomas felt the weight of every man who had sought power in Memphis, every traitor, every politician, every shadow hidden conspirator who had tried, and failed, to comprehend what he now touched. They had only glimpsed fragments of this truth. Only he could bear it fully. He drew a slow, deliberate breath, letting the hum of the universe course through him, and in that moment he realized the door was not a barrier. It was a mirror. It reflected what lay inside him, what lay inside all men who dared to seek knowledge forbidden, who dared to look past comfort, illusion, and fear. Thomas pushed. The door gave way, and he stepped through. The last thing the darkness whispered before swallowing him completely was a promise, and a warning. "Once you return, you are no longer the same. Men will try to own you, history will try to erase you, but you carry the impossible truth, and they will never forgive you for it." Silence fell. Except for one sound, a heartbeat, not his, not theirs, something ancient, something alive, something waiting. And somewhere far away, Memphis exhaled, unaware that history had just fractured irreversibly,